Welcome again. It's Ken Rethmeier, and this is episode number 17, believe it or not. And this one, we're going to take the previous model we were working from and move in the ideas area down into values. And when you think about an organization, just think back about your own organization and other organizations you have been part of. Think about what are those values, those inherent things at the core of the organization that drive behavior. One of the organizations that I got to know quite well in the financial services industry had a value that if you called someone on their team during the day, as my kids used to say, disregardless of the time, the commitment, the value of commitment to the customer was so strong that you were expected to call that person back that day before the sunset. And the purpose behind that was to send a very strong signal to everybody that we dealt with, that we trust you. We want you to be part of our organization, regardless of the interaction we have, whether you're a customer, a supplier, doesn't matter. We want you to feel what we feel about this company. And that company was 130 years old in the financial business, financial services business, and was working on its fifth CEO. Believe it. That's incredible. And the values in that organization were so strong. You could see that every single day. And today what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time looking at what that means and how do those values drive and create the energy, as I put it here, in an operational mode, so that every day when you come to work, you think about not yourself, not the person next door, but the people who you're going to interact with, both inside and outside the organization, and how those values, particularly if you're in a leadership position, provide a very strong message to the people you're working with. They're part of the core. And interestingly enough, when someone leaves an organization, more often than not, if you ask them the truth, it was because the value systems that they held, that the organization held, were not compatible. In the case of every organization, those values have got to be strong enough so that you as a leader feel comfortable that they're going to drive our competitive advantage. The values, not just the products. And so what I've got for you to think about is brainstorm your list of the values that you think are the most important in your organization, and then sit down with your team. Run through the same exercise, let them do it, and see how they match up. And where there's linkages between the two, you want to generate energy from those. For those for which there may be differences, it's a great opportunity for productive dialogue, and to think further about how do we make those part of our organization? Or maybe they're not and they don't need to be. So go back to the model. It's about ideas, relationships, processes, and systems. Explore, expand, excel, and we're in that direction and purpose. And this time we're going to talk about values and competitive position, not so much the product development, that's another element. But the important thing here is that the vision that your leaders have for your organization are founded on the values that they believe are the most important. They produce that energy, that foundation of your competitive position and product development or service development, depending upon the kind of organization you have. And in this case, it's concepts of ideas and how do we translate those into reality. And a lot of that comes from the value system. And what I've done here, because I've done a lot of work in the European theater with healthcare, which is very interesting, their value systems in European healthcare are very, very strong across all of the organizations. And you see differences of how they enact those, So what you would see in Romania or Estonia or some of the other Eastern European countries, Hungary, Czech Republic, etc., are different than the United Kingdom. They're different than what you would find in the Netherlands. But the strongest values are those that you see there: universality, access to good quality care, equity, meaning everyone gets at least the same at a starting point, and solidarity, that it's a good, strong relationship. And how they enact those are the operating principles that they use through their organizations to ensure what our vision says, we're going to deliver on that vision. And it's important for the leader to know, how do you have a productive dialogue with your own organization, your leadership team, and the people that you work with? And it's important every time you have a meeting. In fact, one organization I went to, they started every single meeting with a look at their value systems, what their strategic principles were and their initiatives, and how they fit together. That was their starting point. And then they might have other topics that they dealt with. So in this case, it's operating principles through continuous training, safety, care based on evidence and ethics, very important component, particularly in healthcare, patient-centered or person-centered or client-centered if you're in some other organization or type of industry. And very important, the right to redress for wrong. If you make a mistake, you admit it. You admit it and you fix it. And you take responsibility and accountability for it. So the question for you, as I put here, is, are you ready to do your thing to manifest this opportunity? How are you going to act in your organization to translate the values that you have and your organization into reality? Here's a short exercise. You're the leader. Here's the foundation and basis for team exercise. Ask yourself this question: what kind of environment have I created in my organization? Is it one based on trust or the lack thereof? If it's the former, gather your team together and devote about 2 hours. That's not strict, but that's a good idea. Gives them a good time to think about and have a dialogue, for a productive dialogue and a learning opportunity. And the steps that we're going to walk through, we're going to try to provide you. How do you make that happen? Step one, you brainstorm with your team. First thing is group agreements. What do I mean by that? That is, how are we going to act together, interact together in our meeting today? And some may say, oh, that's silly. No, it's not. It's not, because what you do is you're setting some standards of excellence, hopefully, that we are going to interact. We're going to commit so that when I say something, you're not going to cut me in half while I'm speaking. You're going to let me finish. You're going to listen. You're going to ask productive questions. And chapter 1 of my book, Leading for Value, has this whole thing spelled out so you can look at it. It's a hint. Get the book. Take a look. Oh, yes. And anyone can challenge anyone else in the attendance. That's very important, because that's part of that learning exercise. Developing that each time we meet together, we learn something about each other. We learn something new about the company or the organization. But the bottom line is we trust. We trust each other, and that goes a long way. So step 2 is using the organization's vision statement. Okay? Then ask the group to write down one per small piece of paper. We used to use blue slips. That's what we called them, and they worked out very effectively, of what the organizational values are of today that support our vision, and collect them. This is going to get interesting. In step 3, what do? You have someone read those values, the group identified, and if possible, group common values together under umbrellas of common headings. So, for example, in this case, I say commitment to community, because that's the focus of the healthcare environment that we're trying to create across all of Europe and especially across the United States as well. And so those values can be clumped under umbrellas of key words or phrases that you will use to evaluate in step 4 and find out What are the most important and why? And you want to work towards a final list, because that then is the list that you write down. And each time you go out doing your elevator speech, you will refer back to those values as being an important component of your leadership role in the company. And I guarantee it works. I did it when I was a leader of my organization in the Navy. I saw many, many CEOs that I worked with. And I told you about the CEO of the hospital in Dallas and or Houston, and I challenged him on his vision. And by gosh, everybody in the company, everybody in that medical center knew the vision, and they knew how they contributed to it. So the idea is you want to get consensus so that when someone says your organization, immediately what pops into your head and the people you're working with are those values. And I guarantee you that'll go a long way. And it's not just an isolated incident. And then step 6 is brainstorm what and how to use both inside and outside the organization in terms of action plans, the speeches, public settings that you have, internal meetings, and how do they work out. That's an important piece. And you know what? The other piece of this is not on the slide. Do that about every 6 months. And you'll be surprised at how things may have morphed a bit, changed, or enlarged, expanded. But the important thing is those values clump together with your vision, form the basis upon something really, really effective. So here at the bottom of the line here, leader. Yes, you have the responsibility and the accountability to ensure that values sustain superior performance. It's not just what you do every day. It's how you do it and why you do it. And that takes us back to that competitive positioning that we addressed in an earlier session. But in this one, what I want you to do is an exercise of commitment and alignment, I'll call it. Brainstorming with senior leaders, group leaders to reconfirm and establish a clear link to your organization's values first and how they apply in this setting. So the values of the competitive advantage, regardless of whether it's product leadership, operational excellence, or customer intimacy, there are organizational values that fit under that support that effort. For example, in product leadership, one of the examples I like to use is Apple. They're always trying. That's part of their value set. We want to be out front. We want to be first in the market. A good example was when they opened up iPad. And all of a sudden, here was a whole new product, tangible, workable, easy to handle, and very effective. And what happened? All the other organizations, computer organizations and other types in the IT business looked at it and said, hey, we've got to do that. We've got to replicate it, and we'll try to do ours better. Now, when you think about that, here's the other piece. Regardless, again, of the competitive advantage, the people you select, and I guarantee you, I saw this over and over and over again in my consulting work. It's not so much what's on paper. Who are the people you're hiring? Why? And how do they fit within our organization? If you bring someone in only on the basis of their expertise, you're missing the point. Expertise is important. But I was asked at one time, by the way, to become the executive coach for a gentleman who had just been promoted to executive vice president in this financial services company. And my question was, tell me a little about him. Well, he said he's a great producer. He really produces the money for the company, but he leaves a lot of blood on the floor behind. I said, tell me more about that. They did. You know what I told them? I won't be his executive coach. I won't confirm what he's doing is good for the company by being his executive coach. Well, it wasn't long after that, and somehow he left, and I wasn't surprised. So it's personnel selection. Ongoing educational practice. Every time you have a meeting, every time you have a training session, you start that with vision, values, goals, and objectives. Business meetings and public settings in particular, because that's where you want people to say, oh, yeah, I know that organization. That's what they stand for. And a good test is, do they replicate what you're thinking and saying? And the other piece is, as a leader, it's not just you. You want to challenge your team when they go out, that they can do exactly what you're doing inside the organization and illustrating how your values and your competitive advantage work together in strategic initiatives. So that means that this is called the leadership. And I put together a little diagram, personal leadership and effectiveness. And 4 components: synergies-driven teamwork, courageous conversations, interdependent negotiations, and collaborative problem solving. So the challenge for you is to think about, in your organization and its values, how you as a leader would create synergies through your teamwork. What are the values that help that? Courageous conversations, that's a tough one. We don't like to do that. That's been pretty much what I found at a lot of companies that I dealt with. That even happened a fair amount when I was in Europe. In some cases, even more so, because it wasn't politically correct. But in this case, it's important for the leader to show the dedication, commitment, and the professional will and personal humility to go out of his or her way to do everything you can to create that teamwork that's focused. I was fortunate enough to have that when I ran budget execution for Navy medicine. I had 4 outstanding budget analysts. We challenged each other and we grew. And as a consequence, our part of the Bureau of Medicine Surgery in the United States Navy during that period of time was characterized. We got the word out that people knew who we were and what we were doing. And because we were having those courageous conversations and the shared contributions to problem solving, you can imagine in any organization, there are going to be problems that come up almost every day. Some are going to be tactical, some strategic. And you need to have a team that's willing to sit down and challenge each other and work together to solve those. And the last point there is that really this is a form of servant leadership that is guided by the needs and desires of others, not yourself. I can't emphasize that enough. If you really want to be a successful leader, and when you go home at night, feel good about what you've done and what your organization, your team has been doing, it's not about you. It's about the people you work with. And as a consequence, that brings us to the close of this session. I want to thank you for your time. Values and ideas are very important. And the next episode, 18, we're going to challenge you to think about other organizations or companies you depend on for your own success. Sometimes we get so enamored with our internal piece that we don't think about the outside. And that's where we're going to get into network analysis and setting up what is that network we need. And this is especially true in organizations that tend to work in an isolated environment, if you will. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and wish you all the best. And we'll go from there and look towards the next session. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can find my website, therethmeiergroup.com, my email, krethmeier@therethmeiergroup.com. And I encourage you to take a look at the Podbean, kardrph.podbean.com, where the other episodes are and the next ones to come. And remember again, look above. The genius of leadership function is not articulating the vision of a future that is once simple, easily understood, clearly desirable, and energizing. That's what it's all about. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. Take care.